So the movie starts with a scene that shows a woman dangling and then falling from a very tall cliff. The scene then proceeds to show a young girl, Ava, running toward a snowy mountain landscape to reach a house and knock on the door. A man answers the door and is quite shocked to see her and asks her what she's doing there and where her mother was, and before Ava could form a response, she collapses in his arms. And in a futuristic world where humans live side by side with machines, AI engineer Alex Gurel, the same man that opened the door for Ava, returns to his hometown after 10 years accompanied by his robot cat, Gris. He's picked up by his brother David at the airport, who also happens to be another AI engineer. I guess the family loves AI stuff. Anyways, the two catch up on the drive straight to the university, whose invitation resulted in Alex's return after so many years. At the university, he heads up to see Julia, head of robotics and AI department, who was in the middle of giving an exam to her students. Julia is very happy to see him and they engage in a small talk, but he gets distracted by a couple of students manipulating their manufacturing robot horses for their exam. The students didn't know how to fix it in time and they start to panic. And after trying so many different techniques to no avail, they call out the command, "What do you see when you close your eyes?" hoping to reset the horse, but upon the use of the command, the horse completely collapses and dies. Alex was disappointed to watch this, and he warns them to never use the command unless absolutely necessary, as it's a scared command that resets the emotional memory of a machine, and reminds them that even if they manage to reset it again, it will only look the same but will never be the same horse again. Julia then takes him to her office and she shows him the SI-9 robot, an AI modeled after a young boy, and he himself started this design 10 years ago. She informs him that everything is all finished and assembled except for the emotional intelligence software, and reveals that the reason she invited him back was for him to finally finish it, as he's the only one who can make a safe, fun robot. He agrees and decides to work from his father's home where he was staying, despite his brother's offer to let him stay with him and his family. He then gets to the house where he grew up in, which was just sitting there collecting dust, and he's nostalgic to see that the house and his separate underground glass-roofed laboratory are still with all their glory, and they also look just as he remembers them. Julia informs him that they will send and set up all the necessary equipment to his lab for his project, and reminds him that if he's to finish the project soon, they must choose a model, a child to base the robot on as soon as possible. The next day, the university sends a multilingual SI-7 robot named Max, designed by David's team, modeled as an elderly gentleman with a multitude of skills, to Alex's house to do chores and to assist him with anything else that he might be needing. If it was me, I would have asked for a 21-year-old supermodel, but I guess the old man is good enough for some people, not judging. At the university, Alex and Julia go through multiple tapes of kits being observed and tested, and Alex wasn't really that impressed by them, and he declares boldly that all of them are so boring and could impossibly be used to model the base for the SI-9. He says this because he doesn't want his final model to be just some ordinary mediocre machine. As he leaves his meeting with Julia, he decides to go to his ex-girlfriend Lana, who also happens to be his sister-in-law and a fellow AI engineer, and she was teaching her class, and he sits there for a bit and they chat. And after their very brief chat on his way back home, he passes by a playground observing the kids that were playing, and he sees a young girl who notices him watching her and teasingly calls him out and calls him creepy. When he talks to her, he finds her quite unique and interesting, and he tells her about his work and that he would like to work with her, and he tells her to ask her parents if it's okay. He then heads back home and is impressed to find it clean, spotless. Apparently Max is better than a 21-year-old supermodel. So anyways, he gets home, he finds it spotless, and then he has a delicious lunch that Max prepared, and Max gets really frustrated over Gris's defiance to orders, and he asks him to repair his faulty cat, but Alex explains to him that Gris is a free robot and does whatever it wants to. This is kind of illegal, but Alex goes on to explain that he set the cat free and now they must find a way to coexist peacefully. Seeing how worked up Max got over Gris, Alex asks him to take his emotional level from standard level of 8 to a standard level 6. Alex then takes a break from working on his project to attend a dinner at David's house. There he's utterly surprised to meet his 10-year-old niece, who also happens to be Ava, the young girl that he met at the playground. She pretends as though they've never met and introduces herself, leaving him with no option but to play along. They have a pleasant evening together and they chat about old times, and Alex captures the moment. Back at his house, while Alex was studying the footage of Ava and Lana for his project, Max makes an observation suggesting that Ava would be too wacky to model a robot off of, but Alex replies by explaining that he's actually looking for a fun robot. The next day, Ava comes over to Alex's place and calls out to him through the glass dome roof. He leads her inside his his lab and shows her around and introduces her to Max and Gris. He then goes on to observe how she interacts with them in her environment. He gives her a test in which he shows her different pictures of people displaying different emotions and asks her to identify it using only one word, to use her reactions to configure the robot's emotional memory. When he laughs at her for a comment that she made about one of the pictures, she becomes furious and asks him to open the door and storms out. But she comes back and barges in and tells him that if he wants her help, he's gonna have to tell her everything. He shows her the robot and its emotional memory depicted in bulbs, and goes on to explain the character pieces before putting the brain back inside the robot, who wakes up and continues to form memories based on his experiences. Later, as Lana was giving Ava a bath, Ava asks about Alex. Her mother shares that both she and David were angry and sad when he left in the middle of a shared project while they were all studying together. Alex then asks Julia if the SI-9 could be a girl instead of a boy, and she warns him against the negative emotional reaction and challenges of designing a girl. He then meets up with Lana and they discuss life, her career, and how special Ava is. She then asks him to stop doing the tests with Ava as she just wants her daughter to have a normal childhood. Ava comes to Alex's house once again, but he asks her to leave as her parents don't want her to work with him. She baits him by saying that she has a story to tell him about her parents, and if he lets her work, she would spend time with him. And he relents and agrees to do unofficial tests. So they go ice skating and do unofficial word association tests while she teaches him to skate and dance. She then leads him up the snowy mountain, teasing him about her mother. At the top of the mountain, which looks onto the city, she points out her house and points at a separate house and tells him that it's David's, implying that her parents live separately. Back at his lab, Alex observes the SI-9, who comes over to him at his desk and asks about Ava from her picture on the screen. The machine makes its own observations and asks Alex if Ava is his daughter and remarks that she looks like him, which gets Alex thinking and curious of the possibility. He continues to do tests with the SI-9 robot, and during the tests, Alex laughs at the comment that the robot makes, which it ticks off and starts acting out. He refuses to follow orders and throws a tantrum, and then asks Alex to open the door for it as it wants to leave, but then throws a knife at Alex for not opening the door, and this leaves Alex with no other option than to use the scared command, "What do you see when you close your eyes?" causing the robot to collapse and die immediately. Alex goes to a party where both David and Lana were in attendance, and he ends up dancing too closely with Lana, upsetting David enough to leave the party. Once Lana notices David's gone, she asks Alex to help her look for him outside, but once they make it outside, Alex kisses her. This leads her to storm off, and David, who was watching all of this, comes out of nowhere and punches Alex and tells him to leave like he did 10 years ago. Back at his place, he asks Max to turn his emotion level back to 8, which gets Max concerned about the bruises on Alex's face and gives him a hug to comfort him. Later, he informs Julia that he'll no longer be working on the project, and he then goes to Ava and confronts her about the fact that she lied to him about her parents living separately and bids her farewell, which really upsets her. Having heard of his upcoming departure, Lana comes to visit him at his lab as he was packing to leave. She apologizes for what happened the night of the party and admits that she didn't want him to leave, and they embrace one another and kiss. She then says that Ava is like them both because they made her, which Ava overhears through the glass dome by reading Lana's lips, and she runs off feeling very shocked. Lana sees this and chases after her alone, asking Alex to stay back, as she has to handle and explain this to Ava first. She chases after her in the snowy mountains, and she pulls out a GPS tracker and tracks Ava, and finds her unconscious with her face down in the snow. She panics and opens the back of Ava's blouse, and makes an incision on her back, and opens it revealing a metallic board, which she opens to replace a malfunctioning fluid vial. This immediately revives Ava, who starts asking so many questions about what happened and what she is, and she starts to fight with Lana, telling her not to touch her, and amidst the fight, Ava pushes Lana off a cliff, which Lana tries to hang on to as long as she could, but she ends up surrendering to gravity and falling. Ava then runs through the snowy mountains to reach and knock on Alex's door, and Alex was quite shocked to see her and asks her what she was doing, but before Ava gave a response, she collapses in his arms, just like we saw at the beginning of the movie. Back at Alex's place, Ava emotionally confesses to Max about pushing and killing Lana. Max informs Alex of the incident, which prompts Alex to check and confirm that Ava was in fact an SI-9 robot. This leaves him with more questions than answers, and seeks an explanation from Julia, who tells him that Lana was the first one to design the SI-9 robot. Unfortunately, when tested, Ava didn't pass the safety control, but Lana wanted to keep her anyway and gave up everything for her. Julia reveals that she feels responsible for what happened to Lana because she let her keep Ava in the first place, and to ease her mind of the guilt, she offers to be the one to destroy Ava, as she indeed needs to be destroyed. Even though Alex is bonded with Ava, the two have grown fond of each other, and he knows what must be done and convinces Julia to let him do it. The next morning, Alex takes Ava skating. He watches her skate and have fun with Max, and she then calls him over to join them. He does so and they have a good time together, after which she begs him to help her by fixing her as she doesn't want to be bad again. They return to his place and skip dinner, and he takes her straight to bed in his lab, where she watches him instantly as he turns off all his equipment. She then holds out her hand and asks him to read her 1001 Night, a book her mother used to read her every night. She then flat out asks him if he's going to fix her, and through his silence, she realizes the inevitable and she gives him a hug. They both cry and he calls out the command, "What do you see when you close your eyes?" which collapses her immediately and she dies. We see her memory components and bulbs bursting and hear her narrate in her memory what seems like an answer to his final fatal command posed as a question. She narrates that she sees a light, him and her mother, with himself in the middle of all of them, together playing forever on the beach.